Hi, boys and girls. I'm down here in my basement again. Lyndon will probably be joining us in just a few minutes. She's finishing up lunch, and you may see the cats again, and that's okay. But I wanted to take this time to read to you, but I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about a video I sent to your parents about the Dust Bowl. And I hope some of you have watched it. If you haven't watched it, I encourage you to do so. It's only about 4 minutes long, but it explains a natural catastrophe that happened partly because of bad farming practices. I drew a little picture here. This represents the soil in the Southwest. If you remember when we read I Survived the Children's Blizzard, our main character, John, talked about the prairie grass being as tall as a person. That prairie grass also is in Texas and Oklahoma and parts of New Mexico, and it's very, very tall. And because it's so tall, it also has some deep, deep roots. And you've learned from science, from Miss James, that those roots hold the soil and prevent erosion and weathering. Well, what happened is the farmers came in to get the land, and in order to farm wheat, which most of them did, they got rid of the prairie grass. And when they got rid of the prairie grass, that means the roots also died. And what that left was just a layer of soil. Now, at first, they planted wheat. And wheat can go fairly tall, but not as tall as prairie grass. And its roots are not as low, don't go down as far either. As long as there was rain, this was okay. But what started happening in the 1930s, there was a drought and there was no rain. And because of the drought, the dirt became dust, basically just dust, kind of like flour that you cook with bread. You know how fine that is and how it gets everywhere. And the wind would come along and blow up these massive dust hurricanes, basically, is what they were. They were too big to get out of the way and too fast to run away from. And people suffered for several years with these terrible dust storms, and that got the nickname the Dust Bowl. And a lot of people ended up leaving their homes because of that. So I wanted to give you a little background on the Dust Bowl before we start our book. Now, yesterday, we read part of chapter 1 of The Best School Year Ever. They're really long chapters, so I kind of have to stop in the middle of the chapters. But last we left off, Gladys had been wearing a sign that said, "Beware of Gladys," and she didn't seem too ashamed of that. Of course, Gladys wouldn't. So here we have today. I'm going to start back up. Now, our narrator is the same narrator as we had in our first book. Beth is her name. Her brother is Charlie, and the one that she has to deal the most with is Imogene. And if you recall, the teacher has given a year-long assignment. They have to find compliments for everybody in their classroom by the end of the school year. And for her, that's 28 other compliments to find. And at the end of the year, close to the end, she has to have one person that she finds many compliments for. But until then, she's just trying to survive another year with the Herdmans. Besides everything else they did, the Herdmans could steal anything they could carry, and it was surprising what all they could carry. Not just candy and gum and gerbils and goldfish. They even stole Mrs. Johansson's concrete bird bath. For the goldfish, I guess. And last spring, they stole my friend Luella McCluskey's baby brother, Howard, from in front of the grocery store. Of course, Howard wasn't supposed to be in front of the grocery store. Luella was supposed to be babysitting him, which she did every Tuesday afternoon while her mother went to the beauty parlor. Luella got paid 50 cents to do this, and on that particular Tuesday, we were in the grocery store spending her 50 cents. When we came out, no Howard. The stroller was still there, though, and that's why we didn't think of the Herdmans right away. Usually, if you missed something, you would just naturally figure the Herdmans had it, but when they stole a thing, they always stole the whole thing. It wasn't like them to take a baby and leave the stroller. Luella turned the stroller over and looked underneath it as she thought Howard might have fallen through, which I thought was pretty dumb. Then we walked up and down the street, hollering for Howard, which was also dumb. How would Howard answer? He couldn't even talk. He couldn't even walk or crawl very much. He wouldn't get out of the stroller in the first place. Well, somebody must have taken him, Luella said. Some strangers just walked off with my baby brother. You better tell policemen, I said. No, I don't want to. They would get my mother out of the beauty parlor, and I don't want her to know. She'll know when we don't come home with Howard, I said. Oh, I won't go home, not till I find him. Now let's just think. Who would take Howard? I couldn't imagine who would take Howard. Even my mother said Howard was the homeliest baby she'd ever laid eyes on. But she did say he would probably be just fine once he grew some hair. That's what his main trouble was, having no hair. Here he was, bald as an egg, and Mrs. McCluskey kept rubbing his head with Vaseline to make the hair grow. So when you looked at Howard, all you saw was this shiny white head. Not too good. Probably someone who just loves babies, Luella said, but that could be anybody. It would be easier to think of someone who hates babies, but if you hated them, you certainly wouldn't steal one. Then Luella had another idea. Let's just walk down the street, she said, pushing the stroller. Maybe someone has seen Howard, and when they see us with an empty stroller, they'll figure we're looking for him and tell us where he is. I was pretty disgusted. Luella, I said, you know that won't happen. But it did. The first person we met was my little brother Charlie, and the first thing he said was, if you're looking for Howard, the Herdmans have got him. Luella looked relieved, but not very, and I didn't blame her. If you had to choose between a total stranger having your baby brother and the Herdmans having him, you would pick a total stranger every time. What have they done with him? Luella asked. They're charging kids $0.25 to look at him. Why would anybody pay $0.25 to look at Howard? I said. We can look at Howard anytime. They don't tell you it's Howard. They've got up a sign that says, see the amazing tattooed baby, 25 cents. They tattooed him, Luella yelped. My mother will kill me. Actually, they didn't tattoo him. What they did was wipe off the Vaseline and draw pictures all over his head with waterproof marker. Charlie was dumb enough to fall for the sign. He paid his $0.25 to see an amazing tattooed baby, and of course he was mad as could be when it turned out to be Howard McCluskey with pictures drawn all over his head. So he tagged along behind us, insisting that Luella get his money back, but we both knew that Luella would have all she could do just to get Howard back. If it was anything but the baby, she said, I wouldn't even try to get it back, not from the Herdmans. They've already collected $6.50, Charlie said. You ought to make them pay you some of that just for the use of Howard. I'll probably have to pay them, Luella grumbled. She was right. When we got to the Herdmans, there were 3 or 4 kids lined up outside the fence, and Luella marched up and said to Imogene Herdman, you give me back my baby brother. But Imogene pretended not to hear her and just went on collecting money. You want to see the amazing tattooed baby? She jiggled the money box at Luella. It'll cost you $0.25. It's no tattooed baby, Luella said. It's my little brother. Imogene squinched her eyes together. How do you know? I just know. You do not. It could be anybody's baby. It could be some baby you've never heard of. It'll cost you $0.25 to find out. Sure enough, it was Howard, and he was a sight. The whole top of his head was red and green and blue and purple with pictures of dogs and cats and trees and tic-tac-toe games. I don't know what you're so mad about, Leroy Herdman said. He looks a lot better than he did. In a way, Leroy was right. Howard looked a lot more interesting, but nobody expected Mrs. McCluskey to think so. We took Howard back out back of my house and tried to wash off his head, which is how we found out the pictures were all waterproof. Now what'll I do? Luella asked. Tell your mother the Herdmans did it, Charlie said. She'll just want to know why I let them do it and how they got a hold of him in the first place. Maybe we should use some soap. We tried all kinds of things on Howard, but the only thing that worked at all was scouring powder, and that didn't work too well. It made his head all gritty, and it didn't take off all the purple. If you don't stand too close to him, Luella said, and then you squint your eyes, does the purple look like veins? It didn't to me. But after all, I told Luella, I know what it is. Your mother doesn't know what it is, so maybe it will look like veins to her. It didn't. Mrs. McCluskey was so mad that she got a sick headache and spots before her eyes and had to lie down for 2 days. The first thing she did after she got up was go to work on Howard's head to try to get the purple off, and she discovered 2 or 3 patches of soft fuzz. So then she wasn't mad at the Herdmans anymore. She said that something about drawing or the magic marker ink must have started his hair to grow. But she was still mad at Luella, which didn't seem fair. After all, it could have been the scouring powder. I said that to my mother, and I knew right away that I had made a mistake. Because she said, "What scouring powder?" And then, "Beth Bradley, come back here. What scouring powder?" So then I got punished for putting scouring powder on Howard's head, and Luella got punished for leaving him in front of the grocery store, and Charlie got punished for not having any Choco Whoopie bars from the ice cream man till next week. "That's what your quarter was for," Mother told him. "Next time, you'll think twice before you throw away your quarter on something silly." Of course, Howard got some hair, but he was just a baby and didn't care whether he had any hair or not. The Herdmans, who caused all the trouble in the first place, got $6.50. If anybody but the Herdmans had stolen a baby and scribbled all over his head and then charged people money to look at him, they would have been shut up in the house for the rest of their natural lives. But since it was the Herdmans, most people just said how lucky Mrs. McCluskey was to get Howard back all in one piece. And that was that. The truth is that no one wanted to fool around with them, so you knew that unless they tried to hold up the First National Bank or burn down the public library, you weren't going to see the last of them, especially if you had to go to Woodrow Wilson School and be in the same class with Imogene and figure out something good to say about her before the end of the year. We'll start chapter 2 tomorrow. You all stay safe, and feel free to text me or FaceTime me or email me, and keep working hard, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.